Yes. Uh, Thank you, Alan. I'm actually inspired to do this speech because of a speech Alan gave about that everyone has a gift. And he inspired me to, and others, to talk about things that interest us and things that we enjoy doing. Running is a gift. It's something that everybody can do. It doesn't require any special body type. You don't have to be a huge guy like a football player. You don't have to be tall like a basketball player. You can be any shape, any size. You don't even have to be physically fit. You can be in a wheelchair. You can run with crutches. As long as you can propel yourself forward, you can be a runner. I'm going to share my screen. I've been a runner since I was a little kid. I chasing my kite, my runaway kite in the gorge. I was blessed with good biomechanics and healthy heart and lungs. But as I said, anybody can be a runner. Racing takes running to a whole new level. Racing is more like a craft. It's taking the gift of running and applying it in a different way. There are two ways to think about racing. You can be strategic and just try to get to the finish line first, or you can take it as getting from point A, the starting line, to point B, the finish line, along a set course in the fastest time. I started racing as a sophomore in high school, and I started out with the first approach. I would just try to hang on the shoulder of the leader if I could, and then try to just beat him to the finish line at the end of the race. But in my junior year, I was doing that again. There were two guys ahead of me, and I was just trying to stay with them. As I was approaching the final lap, I realized I can run a lot faster than these guys. So I passed both of them and just ran as hard as I could for the last lap. And I ended up winning the race. And I'd never been as tired as I was after that race. My heart was pounding, my breathing was just incredible. I was staggering around after I crossed the line. The track looked all wavy. It was weird. But I realized I hadn't died, and I realized I could do that again. Now, different distances have different elements. They feel different. And I like this quote from runner and writer Hal Higdon. That's really very accurate. When I run a mile, it's a very intense experience. I'm going all out as fast as I can for 4 laps. Just running as hard as I can to the finish line. And the difference in times can be tenths or hundredths of a second. It's a very intense race. And yet, when I run a mile, after I finish, I always feel like I could have run it just a little bit harder because it goes by so quickly. It's just a very interesting experience. Half marathons and marathons are much different. When I get to the end of a marathon or a half marathon, during the race, you can kind of relax and settle into a pace, but it wears you down over time. At the end of a marathon or half marathon, I don't look like I'm running anymore. I look like I'm staggering. My form is terrible. I'm shuffling. I'm happy that I crossed the line, but my legs are dead. I'm hunkered over. I'm just really shuffling. It's a much different experience. It is like being roasted over hot coals. My favorite distance is the 5K because like a mile, I feel like I'm pushing myself the whole way. But when I finish, if I finish a good 5K, it feels like I couldn't have done it any faster. I couldn't have pushed it any harder. It's intense and it's really satisfying when I run a good 5K. I don't feel like I left anything on the course. I finish with my head back, gasping for breath. I call it the finish grimace. The experience of racing is very strange for me. It feels like I'm in my own little bubble, my own world. Running a hard 5K is just pure effort. Running and racing is very simple. It doesn't require any particular skills. It's just effort, pure effort. In some sense, it feels like a kind of panic. Either I'm chasing somebody, trying to stay up, chasing them down, as in this race in college. My teammate, who was a senior when I was a freshman, was much faster than me, but I just decided to stay with him as long as I could. This was a 10,000 meters on the track. I just ran on his back as much as I could, and it paid off. I was able to set a PR, a personal record, and finished not too far behind him. The other feeling is that you're being chased. In this race, it started out in a wide area, but it narrowed down to a narrow trail quickly. And I knew that I wanted to get to that trail fast. That's me in the yellow shorts, because with so many people, I didn't want to get caught up in the traffic. So I ran as hard as I could to the trail. And from then on, I felt that the whole field of runners was chasing me down the trail. And it was true, they were. It was a very intense, difficult race. I had to stay ahead, and I felt all these people on my back. Sometimes it's just one person. You can sense that person's gaze burrowing into your back as he's trying to catch up and pass you. Sometimes you're all alone, and still you feel like you're being chased. Now, you should never look back in a race because everybody is giving the same effort. If you go up a really hard hill, everybody behind you has to run that same hill. So just get up at the best you can and don't worry about the people behind you. Besides, if you do look back, you're liable to get a sore neck, and that can affect the rest of your race. The best way to race is when you're in a pack with teammates and other competitors around you. That way, you're both getting pulled and pushed along, and you have people around you you build off the energy of the people around you like that. And it's great to have a teammate too to run with. My best half marathon actually felt like a 5K because I was in a group the whole way. Racing is a craft, and each race can feel like a piece of art, actually. In college, I began to think that each race, I would be kind of leaving an indelible mark on the course because I was in my best shape and I was confident. I also sometimes think ahead of my strategy and what I might do later on the course. In this race in college, I ran with this runner from Concordia for over a mile. We were side by side, stride for stride. We kept increasing the pace. Neither one of us backed off. But the whole time I was thinking, when I get to a certain point on the course where we take a turn and head for the finish line, no matter what, I'm going to push it as hard as I possibly can at that point. Just give it all I can, run all out to the finish. If he stays with me, fine, more power to him, great race. But if not, I think I can pull ahead and edge him out, and I was able to do that. Basically, when I race, I'm trying to get to the finish line as fast as I can, and nothing after the finish line matters. I can retire from racing then. I'm just going to get through this race. Nothing else matters. I can retire, I can collapse in a heap, just get to the finish line. And usually I do collapse in a heap. My heart is pounding, my breathing is intense, but I need to sit down and recover. My most intense races, I just lie on my back and stare at the sky until my heart stops pounding, and I can catch my breath. It's really true. Everybody can be a runner, no matter what. In this race, I'm working really hard up the hill, running as hard as I possibly can near the end of a race. And yet, if you look over at the side, this brand new runner is making it look really easy. Okay, I'm finished, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have about racing or running.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead, Alan.
I took racing, running, call it what you need, in the college. I was promised at the end of the course that if you did this right, you follow my training, you'll be able to run 5 miles with no problem, and you'll get this euphoria that you've never, ever experienced before. And I gave it my all. I've never had anything more than the sorest legs, a mild headache. So explain this euphoria that people claim to have.
Well, actually, I hear that a lot, but I don't know that I've ever had that sense of euphoria myself. My sense of happiness is more a sense of satisfaction for having done something really hard and not having to continue it and be able to rest. But as far as that runner's high, I'm not sure I've ever really experienced that. I think I've been really happy on a run a few times, but it's more based on the context of where I am and how I feel physically. But it's more of a physical thing that I feel like I'm in good shape, not so much a mental high. So I know people do experience that, but personally, I'm not sure I really have.
All right. Thank you.
Daniel, you have your hand raised. Oh, you're muted.
So who's the best race director you ever known?
There's this guy named Daniel Brewer who was really excellent. He put on this great race, one of my favorite races, the Clackamas Cross Country Classic. It had a number of heats for different age groups and genders. And if you were over 40, you could run the open race and the Masters race, which I really loved. That race was set at a fun park, a nice course. And one year we had this terrific biblical flood, and the water kept rising and rising, and the course cones were floating away. And this race director, Daniel Brewer, was able to go with the flow, literally, and reroute the course. And on a good weather year, that was a fun race, but that flood year was especially fun and memorable. He did a great job. And there was another director in contrast that would add extra loops around the end of the course to make up the distance. And that resulted in some really funny, weird little loops, like running through a tent, a canopy at a festival between the picnic tables. But I'd say Daniel Brewer was one of my favorite race directors. Chris, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Really impressive story. Great to hear your passion for running. I want to share with you one of my 2023 goals. It's like a stretch goal. I've always envisioned myself running a marathon, although I never run. I have
Oh,
not
yeah.
run one single mile in my life. Maybe I
Wow.
ran on like a treadmill, but I cannot say I ran a complete mile. So question I have for you, given your tremendous experience with running, where do I start? What's the first step for me to launch me towards getting ready to run 26.2 miles, or how many miles the marathon is? I'm sorry, I'm European, so I know it's like 42
Oh, yeah,
kilometers.
right. Well, I think the main thing is to start out gradually, work your way up to longer mileage. Start out running a mile or two just to get used to it. Make sure your shoes are working right. Get good shoes so your feet are not getting beat up. And if you feel any sort of twinges or aches or pains that feel a little weird, back off and assess that. But basically, gradually increase your mileage over time. Don't try to do a lot early on until you get used to it and until you feel comfortable. And I'm sure you're uninjured and not tweaking anything or getting any soreness or anything like that. And then your confidence will build, and pretty soon you'll feel your fitness increasing. I hope that helps. Kyrie.
So I ran track, and so I know every race has its own strategy. So I love the 800 because I feel like it's a mix of a sprinter and a long distance run. What race do you feel involves the most strategy?
I don't know. I think my favorite race in high school, and I would have done it in college too, was the 3,000 meters. And that's a good one because unlike the mile, it's long enough so it feels like there's some ebbs and flows in it. And I really like that one. It was 7.5 laps. And it's a little under 2 miles, but it goes by quickly, but not so quickly that you can't strategize and figure out when you want to put on a surge, or if you want to kind of hang behind somebody and then try to pass them later. So I think for me, I think my favorite race as far as strategy was the 3,000. 5,000 on the track or on the roads, it's a little longer, so there's not as much chance to plan a kick and that kind of thing. So I think the 3,000 meters was my favorite strategic race. Eduardo.
Hey, Joe, great speech. What's your favorite running shoe brand?
Well, it changes, but let's see. I used to like Asics. I haven't tried them for a while, but they were good. For a long time, many years, I've liked a shoe called the Saucony Kinvara. It's a great combination of cushioning and lightweight, so I really like that for training and racing. Saucony Kinvara. And lately, I've been kind of alternating between Hoka's, which have a lot of cushioning, really thick soles and well cushioned. And just in the last few weeks, I've really liked a shoe called by Topo Athletic, TOPO, that have a much thinner sole. So I feel like I'm really stable and low to the ground. I thought at first that the relative lack of cushioning would not be so great, but actually I've gotten to like those a lot. So those are a few suggestions of shoes that I like. Also, I just thought of another one. There's a model of shoe called the Brooks Rebel, which is kind of like the Kinvara. They're a little bit heavier, but they have a good combination of cushioning and flexibility. So I like those too.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Joe, for a wonderful speech. I appreciate it. And thank you guys for your questions. Awesome questions for Joe.